One of the most dangerous features of chronic disease is how quietly it begins. There are no alarms, no immediate pain, no visible signs waving a red flag when the damage starts. You could be eating a perfectly normal diet: eggs and bacon in the morning, cheese-smothered lunch, fried snacks by evening, and still have no idea that your gut and immune system are under constant, silent siege. That's the paradox of high-fat diets. The most profound damage occurs long before the first symptom arrives. At the cellular level, the body is constantly trying to adapt to what you feed it. But when meals are chronically high in saturated and trans fats, especially in the absence of balancing fiber or polyphenol-rich foods, that adaptation turns into a slow collapse. One of the first places this is felt is in the intestinal lining, the thin but highly dynamic barrier that separates your bloodstream from the chaos of the gut microbiome. Under normal conditions, this lining functions like a tight customs checkpoint. But with repeated exposure to high-fat foods, the barrier begins to loosen subtly. You won't feel this happen. You won't see a bloated stomach or get a rash. But internally, small gaps form between epithelial cells, a phenomenon known as increased intestinal permeability, or more colloquially, leaky gut. This allows bacterial components like lipopolysaccharides, LPS, to pass through into the bloodstream. Once there, they don't cause fever or nausea. Instead, they provoke low-grade, chronic immune activation. This inflammation is subclinical, meaning it doesn't show up in a standard checkup. It's just enough to keep the body in a perpetual state of alert. This is where the seeds of diseases like inflammatory bowel disease, IBD, Crohn's disease, and metabolic syndrome are quietly sown. In IBD and Crohn's, a breakdown in gut barrier function combined with an overreactive immune response sets the stage for long-term inflammation, ulceration, and tissue damage. And while genetics and microbiome composition play a role, dietary patterns are increasingly recognized as major triggers, not by causing dramatic flares from the start, but by feeding the silent inflammation that primes the gut for breakdown. Likewise, in metabolic syndrome, a condition that includes insulin resistance, high blood pressure, and abnormal cholesterol, silent inflammation plays a central role. As LPS and other pro-inflammatory signals circulate through the body, they interfere with insulin signaling in muscle and liver cells, promote fat storage, and damage vascular tissue. But because these changes occur incrementally, many people go years without knowing they're already progressing down a path toward diabetes or cardiovascular disease. The cruel irony is that early symptoms, when they do arrive, are often vague or dismissed: a little brain fog after eating, a few extra pounds that seem hard to lose, fatigue, mood swings, maybe mild digestive discomfort. Nothing serious enough to raise concern. Certainly nothing that screams, "Warning, your immune system is malfunctioning and your intestinal barrier is falling apart." Meanwhile, inside your gut, immune cells like ILC3S, as previously discussed, are being reprogrammed by lipid overload. IL-22 production drops, mucus production wanes, and protective antimicrobial peptides vanish. Microbiota start to shift toward less diverse, more inflammatory profiles. The gut becomes not just permeable, but unstable, a fragile interface that no longer knows how to separate friend from foe. And all of this can happen while you feel perfectly healthy. By the time true clinical symptoms arrive, persistent abdominal pain, bloating, chronic fatigue, or metabolic dysfunction, the damage has already been layered deep. Chronic inflammation doesn't pop up overnight. It builds slowly, a drip feed of molecular distress that becomes pathology over time. That's why early detection is so difficult and why prevention through dietary choices is so important. The body doesn't give you a loud warning when you cross the line. It just quietly shifts into dysfunction. And the typical Western diet, with its high fat-to-fiber ratio, low diversity, and repeated inflammatory triggers, is a masterclass in how to tip that balance without setting off any alarms. So here's the unsettling truth. The path to chronic illness doesn't begin with a crash, but with a whisper. A silent erosion of immune control, microbial harmony, and cellular resilience, all fueled by dietary patterns that seem harmless on the surface. By the time your gut tells you something's wrong, it's often already too late to prevent the diagnosis.